Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses, and this is the fourth dimension, an article taken from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 11, Number 4, May 1933. The fourth dimension. Editor's note. As the author of this month's contribution to the Sanctum Musings has said, the universe is a unity of what is discernible and what as yet is not. Therefore, we occasionally offer in this department articles which may be termed abstract, the object being to contemplate upon the known so as to arrive at an explanatory theory of the unknown. As our theories are substantiated, we add to the knowledge. You will therefore, I hope, find the following article one of this type, something that will help you understand better what is known of matter and space and possibly excite your curiosity to investigate further. It would appear reasonable to arrive at a comprehension of the fourth dimension that we proceed by successive steps, for instance from the first to the fourth dimension. However, the first three must be grouped into one class because they have a single value. Therefore, our four dimensions give us but two values. The generally accepted value of the first class, namely the three dimensions, length, breadth and depth, is the measurement of objects in space. By this is meant the determination of the area that an object occupies in space, its specific magnitude. This proposition is based upon the premise that space is a state of non-being, a true void which is decreased by being occupied by realities, things that are. It seems, therefore, that the purpose of the three dimensions is to contrast reality with non-being. To give dimension to something appears to give it a state of being in comparison with space, as said, is conceived as non-being. The weakness of this prevalent premise is that it may also be used to refute the above conclusion that objects occupy space. For example, if space is devoid of being, we must deduce that it is limitless, and if limitless, no portion of it can be occupied by objects. How can something which in itself has no magnitude have a portion of its area occupied? By objects is meant forms of matter, whether they be animate or inanimate. Perusing this common premise further, we are compelled to assume that the various forms of matter are detached in space. For if they were not, upon this reasoning, everything would have like proportion, because everything would be one. Therefore, even where two forms of matter have identical dimensions, they are considered detached. Only where objects are so unified that it is not possible to ascertain where the dimensions of one cease and the other begin, are they designated as a unity of objects having equal dimensions. A bale of cotton and a bale of wood, if of equal dimensions, are nevertheless considered detached forms of matter in space. If they be so united as to have a common group of three dimensions, they are declared one object. It is this hypothesis of detached forms of matter that maintains the concept of space a condition of non-being. Continuing further our consideration of the meaning of detached forms of matter, we find that all forms that may be distinguished one from another are placed in this category. For example, two objects whose natures are identical are not regarded as one because we are aware of something, or perhaps what commonly termed nothing, between them. They are said to be separate. These intervals of non-being between forms of matter are referred to as space. By what rule, however, do we determine that which constitutes form and that which does not? Generally, anything which is perceived apart from man and which is of the physical world is form. Man expects matter to be unlimited in its expression. Therefore, he does not establish any standard by which to judge the reality of matter's myriad forms. Regardless of how extreme one form may be as compared with another, both are recognized as forms. In other words, whether the expression of matter be as a liquid, a solid, or a gas, it is form. From this we find that our only guide is, as said, sense perceptions. What may be perceived is form. Man distinguishes forms one from another by comparison, and where they are identical, they are said to be separate if there is a realization of a condition of difference between them. This condition of difference is referred to in some instances as space. To space, therefore, let us apply the rule that we use for determining form, that is, what may be perceived is form. Do we not perceive space? How would we be aware of it otherwise? Let us consider space for the moment as but the opposite polarity of matter, as though matter and space compose a unity of some kind. Can we then but recognize one phase of the duality of anything as real and regard the other as not? Is not hot a reality the equivalent of cold? and are not hard and sweet realities, the equal of their opposites. This being so, then space is as real as its opposite with which it contrasts. Space may be considered the negative phase of matter, as darkness is to light. It is from space that which is declared matter generates. To put it more effectively, in space we are not able to detect the multiplicity of being or forms, and therefore conclude their absence. It is not until matter assumes form discernible by the senses that we term it such. Space, because of the fact that we perceive it, even if by contrast, may rightly be said to be form. That which has the qualities of space always participates in the idea we have of space, and is realized as such by us. If the qualities which are attributed to space were absent, then we could not realize it as space. Therefore, certain qualities constitute the form of space just as definitely as certain things compose the form of a house. For analogy, space may be likened unto a beam of sunlight which to the naked eye is unicolor, yet which, when focused on a prism, is broken up into various colors of the spectrum. It would be illogical to say that the various colors did not exist in the beam of sunlight, but only apart from it. Furthermore, it would not be reasonable to state that the colors in the spectrum were light forms and that the beam of light, because it appeared to be unicolor, was formless. It is man's lack of knowledge of the relation of space to matter that causes him to term space non-being. Man has not discovered the fundamental unity of both. In matter, organic or inorganic, are evidences of the law of duality. This dualism is either sexual, magnetic, or electrical. It does not disturb the unity of the form of matter. In fact, the form appears to depend upon it. The universe as a whole has this attribute of duality, and the selection of one of its phases alone as reality is the denial of its unity. As the elements composing gases, liquids, and solids are being, so too are the embryonic forces of the universe which underlie them. The universe is a unity of what is discernible and what as yet is not. In the universe there can only be being, for if order exists, and we have evidences of it, then there would be no place apart from order to constitute a state of non-being. Order permeates all where it resides. Even disorder is but a relative order. Order permeates all because it is from order that all is composed. May we conclude then from this that space is being expressed also in form. But why, might reasonably be asked, does man persist in the use of the three dimensions if all being is one in the universe, even though it expresses itself in different forms? If, as Parmenides said, and we have concurred, the universe is a solid block of the same essence, it would seem impossible to measure it. For where would one begin? How would one apply the dimensions? Where is the top, the bottom, or the end? Actually, however, man does not measure being or matter, but rather the extent of its expression, that which we realize as form. We are aware of these various expressions of matter, and by an arbitrary standard, terms of measurement, we determine the area or range of the particular expression of a form of matter. For analogy, we become aware of what we declare is a granite boulder. Our measurement of it actually is not determining what area it occupies in space, for we have said matter is one with space. We are rather measuring the extent of expression of matter in that particular form. Beyond the extent of that specific manifestation of matter is another of which we easily become aware if we concentrate our senses upon it. We may think of forms of matter as minute planets composing a little universe, each with its definite color, passing in review before our senses. We are aware of them as distinct while we perceive them, as others enter the range of our physical senses and have beginning. The former seem to cease. We measure their form by the theoretical gauge of our senses. The three dimensions determine for us merely the expanse of form of matter. To measure matter, we would need to be cognizant of where matter begins and where it ends. We have seen that to state matter is where space is not is to declare space a non-being, which we have contended is an erroneous concept. We therefore conclude that man measures with his tridimensional standards specific manifestations of matter, form, not masses of matter isolated in the universe. These forms of matter may be further likened unto squares of a checkerboard, each distinctive, yet certainly most closely related. In our earlier statements, we said that the forms of matter were limitless. This unqualified assertion is apt to impress one as meaning the quantity alone. We meant also unlimited quality or variety. From the time of Heraclitus, the doctrine of motion as the cause for the variations of forms of matter has persisted. With that doctrine has been perpetuated the concept that form constantly changes and never attains any pinnacle of perfection, where it remains static. The rapidity of change of form also varies. Some forms change so rapidly that we are aware of their change. Eventually they may attain a particular state where they appear to remain permanent. We then reason that the previous forms which changed rapidly and of which we were aware constituted a process of generation toward the apparently permanent form. Matter ostensibly is at rest when its forms remain without discernible change. This conclusion of rest, however, is arrived at by approximation with more rapidly changing forms. The granite boulder cited above seems to be matter at rest by approximation with, for example, a speck of radium whose change is evident. Eventually, we become aware of a great number of forms of matter that give the illusion of fixity. There is established in our memory the ideas of permanence of these forms of matter. Therefore, whenever we perceive a form of matter that participates in the idea we have maintained of a fixed form, we realize that form again. From this we gather that each form is constantly becoming something else, as Heraclitus said. If this be true, then there cannot be a variety of forms, but only one form. For each form of matter there is the progeny of the former and the parent of the subsequent one. The nature of each form is then composed of the characteristics of every other. To declare that a form of matter reaches an intermediate stage where it is distinct and absolutely unlike any other form is to declare matter at rest in a permanency of form, which not only contradicts the opinion of the greatest modern physicists, but also of the great philosophical minds of all ages. The true and absolute form of matter is its pristine essence, the non-reducible energy of which it is composed. What we realize as forms are illusions generated in the human consciousness. This foundational energy of matter is motion in degrees of rapidity, rhythmic pulsations, oscillations. The frequencies vary but do not clash. If the energy at any time opposed itself, the universe would destroy itself. The harmony of this motion may be likened unto that of music. Each phase of this energy, though dual in its function, has a frequency of its own, as does each musical note have a tone, and the whole composes a scale, as do the notes of a keyboard, for example. These frequencies, however, are not rigid. They blend one into another constantly, as do the notes of music. We have, therefore, a scale of motion, each octave of which radiates impulses, or, as commonly referred to, vibrations. The human senses are able to detect and register the impulses of but a fraction of this scale. These impulses develop in the senses sensations which are transformed by the consciousness into realities, objects of knowledge. The periodical or habitual retention of these sensations creates ideas of form in the consciousness. For example, the continued unity of certain sensations of vision, scent, and touch would evolve in the consciousness the illusionary idea of a particular form of matter which we would identify, for example, as a rose. All that we term as form is but consciousness conferring identity on the sensations of motion of matter. As the sensations blend one into another, the consciousness pronounces them either a new form or associates them with another form of like sensations. It may be difficult for us to conceive of a universe without form, and in its stead an intricate maze of radiations of an energy. How true, however, these deductions make the assertion that matter cannot be destroyed appear. If it were possible to destroy even an infinitesimal radiation of the energy of matter, the universe as an entity would be destroyed. So closely attuned are these radiations of the scale of motion. In previously stating that the three dimensions were utilized to ascertain the extent of form of matter, we can now understand that the dimensions but measure the range of consciousness of particular sensations. These dimensions may be applied to any sensations which the consciousness realizes. They do not give identity to the sensations, for the consciousness may be aware of various sensations of matter or forms that when measured would have like dimension. The three dimensions do not give us knowledge of reality of matter because for that we are dependent upon the fourth dimension, or consciousness. All matter is a reality. Its essence and the impulses it imparts are dependent upon consciousness. for a realization of their existence. In other words, they do not become realities to man until the sensations generated by the impulses are realized by the consciousness. When the consciousness has the idea of a certain sensation, or a combination of them as composing an ideal, and that ideal is form or identity, then whenever it realizes sensations which concur with this idea, they become reality to man. This is perhaps more easily illustrated by the arts of conversation and writing. In an attempt to convey to the mind of another that which will equal the realization we have of some physical thing, we describe the identity given by our consciousness to the sensations of matter. It is not easy, and in most instances it is impossible to transmit the actual sensations, so we use words which as symbols describe the idea of the reality, and these word symbols release from the memory of our communicant those sensations which participate in the idea, and he then becomes cognizant of the reality. If someone says to us the word sun, for example, what immediately arises in our consciousness? Is it not the memory of all those sensations which we have grouped together and given the identity of sun? Do we not think of heat, light, color, shape, position in the heavens, everything of which the idea of reality of sun is composed? If we have experienced similar sensations but have formed them into a different idea of reality, then by approximation do we recall this identity that compares in sensation but differs in idea. These sensations of matter are referred to as empirical knowledge, knowledge of the senses, and many philosophical doctrines state that they are unlasting, changing, illusionary, not true knowledge. The sensations of matter, however, are not false. They are, as we have seen, realities. But the individual reasoning applied when the consciousness is aware of them is apt to generate an idea of form which will be discarded in the future because of the change of reasoning and the evolution of consciousness. For this reason alone is it said that knowledge of the senses is false changing. The only things that are absolute to man are sensations, for he only knows of the world outside of himself and the world within through this medium. While there is consciousness, there is cognizance of sensations. More than this, man cannot prove as absolute. Of the four dimensions, the fourth alone is actuality, because it is consciousness. As consciousness stands in immediate relationship to sensations of matter which are actuality, the fourth dimension, the idea of reality, therefore, is actual because it is composed of the sensations. We are not conscious when we are not aware of sensation. When we are, then our consciousness is reality because what it retains is real. This does not contradict the above, where we stated that reason may give wrong identity to sensation. Reason may give any name to sensation and the name may change, but as long as the particular sensations remain, they are reality. In other words, it is the interpretation of the sensations which changes. For example, two men looking at a small object at a distance in the sky may disagree as to its nature. One may declare it an airplane and the other a bird. The visual sensations both receive are identical and are realities. The realization they have of these sensations is also real. The identity given to that realization differs because reason differs. When the object comes closer and is found to be an airplane, as one thought, this merely proves that the one who thought it a bird wrongly classifies with his reason the sensations. That which is not real cannot be realized. For the consciousness to give fourth dimension or the idea of reality to that which had no existence either as a separate expression of matter or composed of several would mean that the consciousness would be capable of contributing to existence, which in turn would be an admission that the universe is not absolute, not perfect. This would be rather a bombastic statement, inasmuch as it could be very easily refuted. The three dimensions, length, breadth, and depth, cannot be realized apart from the fourth, because they have no reality of their own. Try to visualize the form that is the identity of length, breadth, and depth. What, for example, does 12 by 8 by 3 convey to you? For these three dimensions to have reality, there would need be a beginning and an end to matter that you would have previously realized. If this were true, then the three dimensions would, in turn, recall in memory the sensations you had realized of the fixed dimensions of matter, and they would then have reality. Inasmuch as there is neither beginning nor end to matter and its complement, space, The three dimensions cannot be realized by any such approximation. They can only be realized when they are applied to the measurement of the fourth dimension, or consciousness. These dimensions do not measure matter but consciousness, as said before, and as man realizes all matter with consciousness, the three dimensions alone would give sameness to all matter, give no identity to sensations. In other words, all the sensations of matter that we can perceive are realized by the consciousness. And the extent of our consciousness of them is measured by the dimensions of length, breadth, and depth, and other arbitrary standards. A redwood or pine tree could not be distinguished by us as reality of different sensations if they were to be described to us by the dimensions of consciousness, so that is length, breadth, and depth. We find, therefore, that the first three dimensions are subordinate to the fourth. Consciousness is the instrument upon which all matter plays, producing tones of expression which are the forms we realize. Just as music does not exist without an instrument, and its tones are dependent upon the nature of the instrument, neither does form in matter exist apart from the consciousness. Form is the state of harmony of matter and consciousness. As the change in tension or tautness of the strings of a musical instrument will affect the quality of the tones, so will the change in consciousness and reason affect the illusion of forms. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.